If you see something that doesn't make sense, there's a good chance it doesn't make sense. Mike Williams retired recently. He was battling for a starting job with the Chargers, the team that drafted him. Um, Mike Williams had the potential to be a yearly impact fantasy player, couldn't stay healthy, but was great when he was great. And he had a decent shot if he'd stuck with it of having some kind of deep league fantasy value. And in fact, his average draft position when he announced his retirement was 87th among wide receivers. We'll say WR 87. And at the same time, the two guys who were ahead of him on the pecking order were Trey Harris and Quentin Johnston at 62 and 63, respectively. So Johnston was, seen as a bust when he was drafted. He was one of four wide receivers drafted back to back to back to back. First time that ever happened, I think, in the first round of the NFL draft. And he's entering his third season. He stepped up last year at times. I think he's undervalued. I thought that before Mike Williams announced his retirement. But Johnston certainly is looking for a year three leap, and no one really knows based on his ADP. You can see that whether he can do it. And then Trey Harris is kind of the shiny ball, basically the unknown, the second round rookie, who some people believe will be the number two receiver behind Ladd McConkey on this team. But their ADPs were 62 and 63. It suggested that the market really didn't know who was going to be better. I mean, that's the easiest way to say it. So Mike Williams retires. And the expectation, if you have this kind of offense where the number four and number five receivers, barring injuries, are not going to have any impact fantasy-wise. Their ADPs were outside the top 150. This was a four-person battle, and essentially with Ladd McConkey at the top, it was a three-person battle between Harris, Johnston, and Williams. With Williams out of the picture, you would expect the market to react in a pretty meaningful way, that Harris should gain some value. Johnston should gain some value. Or the market might say one of those two would gain value, and it would be significant enough that the 40, 50, 60 targets that Williams might have gotten, just throwing out a random range, that a bunch of those would be distributed among the top three receivers, and that Harris or Johnston would clearly benefit. What I find interesting is that that didn't happen. And that's what I want to talk about for a few minutes today. That Trey Harris, in fact, did get a bump. He moved up 8 spots from WR62 to WR54. That's where he is today, a few days later. But Johnston dropped. He dropped 7 spots from WR63 to WR70. It's pretty much a net wash, right? Williams retires, and we don't see any material impact on ADPs. McConkey is still at WR11. And it's not like, Darius Davis is suddenly reaping the benefits. I mean, his ADP is 152. Before it was 165. The impact of Williams leaving should not be that the potential number 4 receiver gets a nice bump from irrelevance to irrelevance. There's going to be some more meaningful impact to Harris or Johnston, in my opinion. And instead, we see one go up 8 points, 8 slots, the other goes down 7 slots. I think that's ridiculous. I don't think that really is the high probability impact of Williams' retirement. And so this is a buying opportunity if you're drafting soon, that you see these ADPs, and Johnston is now, to me, a pretty easy buy. That even if he's the number 3 receiver, this is still Justin Herbert at the helm. The last year, they were, I'm looking it up, they were the 11th best, offense. And we don't even look at their offense last year, at least I don't, in terms of their passing attack, as this, force to be reckoned with. But Herbert still had almost 4,000 passing yards. McConkey it's not going to be a one-man shop on this team. McConkey's going to probably crack 1,000 yards again, but there's definitely room for Johnston and or Harris to make an impact. There's no more Joshua Palmer. Joshua Palmer had almost 600 yards last year on 65 targets. We might have assumed that Mike Williams could have taken some of those. Now that he's not, you do the math. So this is where I think the market fails us. And it's not the market's fault. It's a bunch of people making draft decisions that is impacting ADP. That's kind of how it feeds into a lot of these systems. It's based on recent draft decision making across ESPN, CBS Sports, whatever logic they use. They pull that data and try to understand where are people drafting these players. Mike Williams' retirement has coincided with a drop in value to Quentin Johnston. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. And therefore, we do a little bit of digging to try to understand the logic. Since I don't understand the logic, other than maybe Johnston just has been quiet in camp. I've talked about this before. People who are quiet in camp tend to get the short end of the stick in terms of their market value, which is actually the long end of the stick for us. Because if people forget about a player in camp and their value starts to drop because they're not this flashy, shiny ball that we all want to grab onto, that is a great thing. I felt that way last year with a bunch of number 2s, like Chris Godwin, if he'd stayed healthy, undervalued. I mentioned last week Wan'Dale Robinson, Rashad Bateman, all these number 2s that were just forgettable because they weren't making a lot of noise in camp. Their values had descended to the point where they were easy buys. And I think right now, Quentin Johnston is an easy buy at his WR70 value. And I think Trey Harris is still a solid get, even though he's moved up 8 spots. There is room in this offense for 3 guys to crack the top 50. And Williams' retirement should reflect something different in ADPs. It does not yet. I would encourage you to just put a bookmark on this and check back in a week or two and see what their ADPs are. That right now their ADPs add up to 122 going into, it is 52 plus 70. Before that, it was around the same. If their ADPs are combined for 110, it's a little more realistic. If their ADPs combined for 100, they're probably valued at about the top I would want to get them. But if their values by the time you draft are around what they are now, past 120, pretty easy buying opportunity for an offense of this ability where there's only 3 wide receivers that are going to get probably 80 to 90% of the targets. Again, I'm BJ Rudell. Follow me, fantasyfootballforwinners.com or the Fantasy Football for Winners Facebook page. If you want my rankings, want to text me questions throughout the season, all that stuff, you just go to the page and you look up how to donate or subscribe, and we go from there. Great talking with you. See you tomorrow.